How's it going, everybody? Appreciate you for coming on in to another edition, chomping at the bit. So last time we talked about Drew Holiday, trade to Portland, Anthony Simons coming over to Boston, and what Anthony Simons' role could be with the Celtics next season. Now I want to talk about the other move that went down, the Kristaps Porzingis trade, which turned into a three-team deal. If you don't remember the deal, Kristaps Porzingis is now an Atlanta Hawk. Terrence Mann with the Brooklyn Nets. George Niang, now a Celtic. There were also some picks involved. I believe the Celtics got a second-round pick as well. Some other picks were moved around, but that's kind of the, you know, crux of the deal. So where the Holiday deal, you bring back a guy with the caliber of Anthony Simons, Porzingis nets you George Niang, who I believe George Niang is a Massachusetts guy. I believe he grew up, I think it was Lowell, I believe I read, but he has ties to the area. There is history with him in the Celtics. If you remember, I believe it was last season, Celtics Sixers game. There was a play with Jaylen Brown, like near the Sixers bench. He was trying to run away. Niang kind of grabbed his knee. Jaylen Brown turned around. That led to a little thing. So, hey, might be a little interesting introduction between those two. But when you see kind of the return, two things come to mind. One, Holiday has more value on the open market than Porzingis does, because you got to remember, Porzingis throughout his career has dealt with injuries. We all know that. Last season, though, with the mysterious illness, that tanked his value even more. Looking at the way he played in the playoffs, looking low energy, shot wasn't there. So, his value wasn't all that high. Because the thought was maybe you go into next season with Porzingis, hopefully build the value back up. You trade him around the trade deadline. Problem is, you run the risk Porzingis going back next season, looking a little off still. Then you really don't get anything for him because he'd be an expiring contract around the trade deadline. Other teams will know you got to get rid of him. So that was at play. And also, with moving out Porzingis and his contract, bringing back Niang, the Celtics get under the second apron. That was probably the more pressing need in this deal, because when you look at some of the restrictions of being a second apron team, it is wild. And look, I see the purpose of it. Adam Silver loves this parity era. So teams can't just buy their way to titles. You have to be smart with picks, smart with your contracts. Guys will kind of move around every few years because teams just can't operate in the second apron for multiple seasons. At most, you could do is two. Because once you get past that, it's like the repeater tax is even worse. Looking at the second apron, the longer you stay on it, the more assets get frozen. So that hurts trades because you can't trade picks as a second apron team. I think each year you're in the second apron, like another year's first round pick, I believe, is frozen. You have to take it unless you drop below. That's what the Celtics were dealing with. Also, with trades in the second apron, you could only trade one player at a time and basically bring back one player at a time. Now, out of the second apron, the Celtics can package guys in deals now, which might be the next deal. Could be, a Hauser plus somebody else towards the end of the bench for another player. So now you can kind of bring in maybe better caliber players by aggregating contracts. Like those are just a couple of the restrictions that you deal with, which is why getting out of the second apron was so pressing for the Celtics. So you were also kind of reminded with the trade last night, first round of the draft, because I think the Hawks and the Nets had picks in that trade that they also took last night. The Nets had 5 first round picks, which is kind of crazy. The crazier part might be that the Nets actually took all 5 picks and made selections instead of, combining some picks and moving around. No, they took all 5. That was kind of crazy. The Hawks, I feel like had a decent draft night. The Celtics sitting at 28. A lot of talk about what they might do. I feel like the consensus was, looking at the front court of this team, you go with a big. I was watching, a couple of draft streams, and I saw some of the players that a lot of these Celtics fans were looking for. Oddly enough, all the guys that were kind of mentioned are still available, and the Celtics pick at number 32. So the Celtics pick very early in the second round, which means they'll still probably get one of those players. So the Celtics go up, number 28. They take, so Adam Silver pronounced it, I think it was Hugo Gonzalez. I know in Spanish the H has a different sound. So Hugo Gonzalez, who I've seen 6'6", 6'7". He's like 210 pounds. So he has an NBA ready body to play out on the wing. I kind of looked around to see similar body types to kind of gauge. And he has a body type similar to Robert Covington. I think Sam Hauser as well has a similar body type. So kind of gives you a better idea. Read up on some stuff, looked at some highlights and everything. Because, look, I don't watch a lot of Real Madrid basketball, which is where Gonzalez was playing. But when you look at some videos and read up on him, seems like he's a guy that has some skill. Like I said, watching some videos, he has some handles. He can break down defenders. He can get to the rim. He's a pretty good finisher around the rim. He has a high motor, which I read, and you can see it in the videos because he's not a guy who kind of just stands around, doesn't do anything. Like, he's the type who will probe defenses, find open space to either get himself in position for offensive rebounding, or, as Brad Stevens, who I'll talk about here in a little bit, kept emphasizing, cutting. He cuts a lot, looking for passes, and I think that's going to be an important aspect of his game. Defensively, he has tools to be a great defender. I think he's a good defender based on what I've seen. And once again, what I read about him. Now, Real Madrid, EuroLeague basketball, a little bit of a different skill set than necessarily the NBA. Although when you look at that Real Madrid roster, a lot of former NBA players on there. I was kind of surprised to see Serge Ibaka plays for them. Dennis Smith Jr. plays for them. Mario Hezonja, former Magic player, plays over there. Campazzo, former Nuggets player, plays over there. I think there's another one. Oh, Bruno Fernando, who spent some time with the Hawks and the Celtics, plays for Real Madrid. Also, what you need to understand, he's 19 years old. So there's definitely a lot of time for growth. So when you look at his stats don't, wow you in any way, but you got to realize 19, playing with a bunch of grown men, how many minutes you think he's going to get? Like, look at the NBA. If you draft a 19-year-old, how much time do you think they're going to play like their rookie season in the NBA? Not a lot. Also, well, depending on the team, obviously, but a team that is a known winner, winning a title not that long ago, 19-year-old's not going to carve out a lot of space. And Real Madrid is a professional team, so he's been playing pro ball. Now, for if Real Madrid, I guess, isn't too, important or recognizable to you, like you might know the soccer team, but basketball-wise, Luka Doncic also played at Real Madrid. You look at Luka's time there. Luka averaged 2 points his first year, 4 his second, 7 his third, and then 12 his fourth season before he was drafted. And now you look at Luka. He is an NBA body, 30-point scorer. Not going to say Gonzalez is going to turn into that, but I think playing professionally over there at such a young age will have him set up maybe with a better floor for the NBA. Now his ceiling, we'll have to see because, like I said, he has good size, he has a good frame. Reading about him, his shot is a little questionable. When you watch video, his form isn't terrible. Seems like he has a good base to his shot. So it might just be something where he gets more reps, which he should get in the NBA. Because Brad Stevens did say that there's no plans on stashing him over there. They plan on bringing Gonzalez over for next season. Now, we'll obviously have to see how much time does he spend next season up in Maine, which that's not a bad thing because in Maine, he'd probably get to start, play, 30-something minutes a night and really ramp up that development. But I guess looking at some more of his skills, as I mentioned, good movement off the ball. He has good drivability. He can drive and kick. Like he has a lot of tools there that makes you kind of understand why the Celtics went there. Once again, a lot of fans would have liked to see them go big, but they probably would have ran the risk if they took, Kalkbrenner or I'm trying to think of the big men that are still on the board. It's like Freeney or something like that. But Reynaud from Stanford, they took one of them. Maybe between 20 and 32, this Gonzalez guy might have gone off the board. So it was probably a calculated decision to take Gonzalez first. And then, like I said, 32, expect them to go a little bigger. Now, another thing you notice with him, he is constantly moving plays with pace. He even uses that defensively. He loves the chase down block. And I think that's going to be something that pops off about him right off the bat. Because once again, Brad Stevens, who I talked after the first round pick, and in his little press conference, he said playing with pace is going to be important because that's what led the Pacers making the finals and Oklahoma City. So now we kind of know the direction this team's going in for the future. Pace. Because he also said with the Knicks series, when they lost games 1 and 2 with a 20-point lead, he said they got stagnant, which allowed the Knicks to kind of chip away and ultimately win those games. So if this team is looking to play with more pace, Gonzalez fits that. Because Gonzalez is a guy, you can get him out in transition. He can finish at the rim. He's got dunking ability. Don't worry about that. So for me not knowing him and reading up and watching it, I'm fine with the pick. I'm not one of those who, just because I don't know who it is, automatically goes, oh my God, what a waste of a pick. No. Brad Stevens has shown he knows how to put a team together. So if this pick is because, obviously they're still going to shoot a lot of threes. That's today's NBA as well. But if he wants pace, I get it. Maybe that gives us a clue as to who they might take at 32, but I don't know. More so on some of the stuff that Brad Stevens said. He said, the Holiday and Porzingis moves, which he couldn't really expound upon because they're not technically official moves yet. But he said they were difficult conversations. So, and we've seen the reaction. Like Kristaps Porzingis thanked the organization, class organization, all that. I think Holiday, like the report about Holiday being upset about going to Portland, I don't think there was anything necessarily about him having ill will towards Boston. So, that, don't have to worry about that. But, Brad Stevens talked about, like I said, pace. He talked about Tatum and Brown with their rehab. Like he said, they're both in Boston putting in work. Obviously, Jaylen Brown with the torn meniscus, that's a different procedure than Tatum with a torn Achilles. So Jaylen Brown will be on a shorter timetable, so he should be back, whatever. But he said that they're both in Boston working. Okay. He also, Brad, reiterized the core of this team because somebody asked about the rumors about Jaylen Brown and all this, which I know Shams kept talking about, like Utah making this push and all this kind of stuff. They talked to like Austin Age, and he was like, "We never contacted Boston about Jaylen Brown." Now that could just be, covering their bases because a deal didn't happen. So now I'm making it seem like, yeah, there was nothing really there. But that's what's coming from Utah's side. Brad wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant years ago when Durant was still young and all that, younger, but never made that move. I don't know why necessarily people were buying into, trading Jaylen Brown for draft picks that weren't number one when this draft is like Cooper Flag and then everybody else. Yeah, I never bought into that, even the Derek White part of it. And Brad Stevens gave us the reason why. He said, going forward, we've got Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, Derek White. Then he threw Peyton Pritchard in with that group. So I guess we're going to take it as that's your core four going forward once Tatum comes back. Obviously, he's saying that now, like if some team went crazy and gave him some offer he couldn't refuse for a Derek White or Jaylen Brown, I'm sure he would do it, but that's not the plan. So, you look at it in that sense with the way contracts are set up now. He also said like Mazzulla, we have Mazzulla for multiple years or something like that. I think there's been some question about how long Mazzulla actually has on a contract. Is he getting a new deal or like something like that? He said we've got Mazzulla for multiple years. So he dropped that as well. He also talked about like Phil Pressey, who used to play for the Celtics, taking over as the coach up in Maine. So he went through a lot, but the key points, he wants the team to play with pace going forward. Brown, Tatum, White, Pritchard are the core. And supposedly, Brad might still be working the phones in terms of Anthony Simons, who might not stay around for long. But I think for a lot of Celtics fans, the moves so far have been a little jarring. But like Brad said, they were necessary because he wanted to get to a place where the team had more flexibility. We all know Brad Stevens loves to make a move, make a deal. Being restricted to just trading one person at a time and all that with the second apron, Brad, yeah, that's not the way to operate. So that's the new NBA. If you're a second apron team, you got like 2 years to win a title, and if you don't, you kind of have to back out of that, shed salary, and kind of start the process again. But I think what you'll see is like the first apron has some limitations, but it's not too bad. So you'll probably see teams yo-yo between like second apron, luxury tax, the first apron. Then when they feel close, dive into the second apron, run its course, go back and kind of operate like that. And some teams will be non-tax teams, your lower spenders, and some teams second apron and kind of hovering around that, dancing back and forth. So I feel like this is the new era, the era of hitting on draft picks, roster construction, smart money, and depth. You can't just have 3-4 guys tying up your cap anymore. It's got to be elongated. So, so I think that was everything I had for you. Like I said, welcome to Boston, Hugo Gonzalez. Seems like a raw talent, why not take a shot down at number 28? So you let me know what you thought about the pick down in the comments. I guess, how'd you feel about the Porzingis trade, the holiday trade? Anything else you want to talk about, Celtics related or even NBA related? Let's have that conversation down below. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow, whatever the platform. Leave a review if you're an audio listener. Appreciate all of you. But yeah, you enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. God bless. I'm out of here. All right. Bye.